Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Frankfurt Major, still in Festhalle Frankfurt. It's day 5, and we just had an amazing 3-game series between Team Secret and Evil Geniuses. And we have a surprise guest, and he was gracious enough to accept this interview. Zai, hello. Thank you so much for taking the chance, taking the interview, of course. We hung out a bit, watched the games, you saw your team play. Let's start with something that's relevant to this event itself, the best of 3 between EG and Secret. Just in general, what are your thoughts on the game?
The games were very close, I think, in terms of strategy and play-wise. I think both teams were pretty much on equal terms in terms of player ability and strategy-wise, captainship and so on. Game 1, I think, came down mostly to Ember Mag being very difficult to deal with if you're not prepared. And then following Game 1 and Game 2, I think they prepared very well, EG, and they developed like a sort of strat for beating Ember Mag, which Secret was still confident with after Game 1. So they managed to beat the Ember. And then in Game 3, I think most of it just came down to the last pick of Huskar, which was essentially, I guess, detrimental to their strategy. They didn't really have any counters to Huskar as a hero in the 4 heroes they already drafted, and then they last banned AAA into last pick Huskar, so they were kind of outmatched in that sense.
Now, we saw a lot of Divine Rapiers in the games themselves. Of course, it goes without saying that it's high risk, and Envy also put a lot of pressure on himself with that. But what interests me more is the way that in Game 2 the whole ending went down, because EG essentially won a fight, got a good pick, and the game ended within a few minutes. And I remember I talked to you about it, and for me it was just like a WTF moment, and you were like, "Oh, that's how it goes, that's just Dota." So in your mind, when Secret was so far ahead and they had the Divine Rapiers, was it in your mind still extremely possible that this pick could happen and EG are still in this game, or did you think it would be very unlikely for them to come back?
I think it was still very likely in Game 2. In Game 1, it was kind of a different scenario because Ember already had like his core items built up. He had the Battlefield, the Daedalus, the Blink, and then he got the Rapiers. But in Game 2, he kind of rushed for the Rapier after his Battlefield, which I think was kind of a mistake. I think in terms of raw damage output, Divine Rapier isn't necessarily better than getting a Daedalus. So I definitely think Eternal Enemy kind of messed up there. I think if he goes for Daedalus, it's a lot more safer. I mean, of course, you have to think from his position, and it was probably that the game was really unwinnable, that they're really far behind, and that he needed the Rapier. But I think in most cases, the Rapier is not going to do anything else that the Daedalus could do. So in that regard, I think he kind of messed up, and it also adds a lot more risk because we saw like as soon as he dies, he loses the Rapier, and that's like pretty much all of his items. If he has the Daedalus, the game is still like it's still possible to come back even after you lose a team fight. So I'd say that Game 2, the Rapier was kind of a mistake. Yeah.
All right. With the next question, I would like to tap into your insight as a professional player, and that comes down to something that I heard Puppy say just now in an interview he did in preparation for the grand final, and that was in regards to EG, saying that he really respects PPD as a drafter and as a captain, especially in terms of his ability to play with the vision game and the information on the map. You being, of course, a friend and teammate of PPD, could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of captains have a certain style that they like to draft and like to play, and I think PPD's is very centered around having vision, and I think a lot of his success comes from having heroes that can abuse vision too. It's kind of how we played back in EG around like TI4 and stuff. It was kind of the same kind of game idea of how to play the game, and PPD's is very centered on vision. All puppies might be something different. So in that regard, PPD is very good at drafting the heroes he wants, and of course, he won TI5 drafting, so he has to have some credit for being a good drafter as well.
How would you describe Puppy's drafting style and game understanding if PPD's is very focused on information and vision?
I think Puppies is very dependent on having surprise heroes, in a sense. Um, in TI5 Secrets, when I played, it was like Brood was one of the heroes that like if you're not prepared in like the second phase or the last pick, you bust out a Brood and you pretty much win the game because the hero composition is too strong for the other team to handle. And it's kind of similar, I think. How Secret is drafting right now is they're drafting around like a very centered core of really strong heroes that they enjoy playing. They have like Mag Ember, sometimes they have the Meepo, sometimes they have the Huskar, and Misery can even play Brood, so they still have that. And I think his ability to like get his players to play these heroes that he thinks are like super good is what separates him from other captains. His ability to bring out like the best out of these heroes.
Now, looking at the two teams, as you said, the games were extremely close, and PPD focuses on you know, creating the game kind of and making decisions throughout the game. You know, he puts a lot of focus on that, and Puppy trying to also incorporate some imbalances within the draft phase to his favor. We saw in this best of 3 series some extremely drawn out and tactical team fights. Is there anything in particular that stood out to you? Like when you look back at the matches, was there something that was it way above average? And have there been any picks, heroes, or players that personally surprised you and got a lot of respect out of you?
In general, I was really enjoying watching these team fights. It was kind of reminiscent of TI5 where CDC was like super good at team fighting, and just the ability to reset a team fight, I think, is very rare in teams these days. Just to like hop in and out, and I think Secret did that really well today, especially with the Ember Spirit, and they had the Bounty Hunter too. So it's really easy for them to just like disengage, and then when they feel that they have a positional advantage again, they'll re-engage. And I think that's something that Puppy and Piladai both excel at as well. Positioning themselves properly in these fights, even after they reset them. So I think that's what's really good with Secret's team fighting right now. And I think Mystery played really solid throughout the series as well. He didn't really have a hero that was, standout hero. He just had like a solid Tuskar. Magnus too. Of course, he missed some RPs, but that's yeah. But I think he played solid throughout the series, and you don't really notice when a player lands a spell, because you pretty much only notice when they miss a spell. So I think they did well. Yeah.
That's great that you say that. I mean, many people share that opinion, but they also knew that with a hero like Magnus, people are going to talk about it. So there you go, guys. Now you've been a sub for a while for EG. Do you try in your own certain way to kind of support the team in this very rough phase? They just got knocked down to the lower bracket. Do you try to kind of just stay out of their way, or do you participate in discussions and so on?
I'm a bit uncertain myself, because sometimes I'm not sure. Since I've been a sub, I haven't really been active in the team. I haven't been watching that many scrims, and I haven't been going to that many tournaments. This is my first one with them since TI, so I'm a bit uncertain how big of a part I should have in the team, how influential I should be. And then they also have Boba, which is their coach right now, who pretty much does what, in my mind, I would do if they didn't have a coach. So right now I've kind of been talking mostly with Boba during the games, and bouncing thoughts back and forth for him to develop further his ideas of the game. But also I had some inputs in between the games, or not in between, but mainly after, trying to, I guess, ease their minds or whatever. Yeah.
What are you? Where do you see, if there are any, weaknesses in the game, and what would be if PPD were to come up to you and say, "All right, can you give us your thoughts? How can we improve?" If he were to do that?
Just in general for the average player, or
if they were to ask you on input as to how to improve and maybe get back into this tournament.
I think for this tournament, I've pretty much only seen the last series where they played against Secret, but it was pretty much only Huskar, I think, for that series. In game 1, I don't think they were fully prepared to deal with Ember Mag, but in game 2, as I said, they adapted well. But then the Huskar just caught them off guard. So if they were to play again and they just kept Huskar in mind through drafting and all that kind of stuff, I think they would do well. Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned that Bulba has been doing the coach role, and you weren't so certain. You know, you obviously don't want to do any damage, so of course you would probably be more conservative than out there, which is very understandable. Can you give us some insight into what the kind of function is that Bulba has been doing in between the games, after the games?
I think as a coach, you need to. First of all, he works a lot with the drafts. Like when we're sitting discussing the games or watching the games throughout the draft, he would just oh, secret pick Ember. That means we're gonna pick this and this, and he would call the right hero every single time. So you can tell he's been working closely with PPD in terms of drafting and figuring out what to draft against what. But then also it's easier to sit on the sideline and kind of watch the game, because it's easier for you to see like where things went wrong. You can clearly point out where things went wrong, where it's not as clear as a player. So I think pointing out what the team did well in one game and pointing out what they should have done, what they did bad, and all that kind of stuff is pretty much what a coach should do.
Now let's talk a little bit about the International 5. Before TI5, there was a bunch of tournaments. I mean, you guys in Team Secret were dominating the scene. And could we talk a bit about the good times in Team Secret, about the atmosphere, and what was unique about it to you when you guys were in the great phase and just stomping everything?
It was a fun time to play Dota, that was for sure. Because personally, I didn't have to put in that much effort. I didn't have to analyze replays. I didn't have to figure out things, new ways to play the game. I kind of just had to do my own thing, which was like a result of us being at the top. We invented a lot of things that were winning games throughout that period of tournaments. So as a result, you kind of just have to play your own game, and then if you play it well enough, you're gonna win, which is like the positive side of staying on top. Everyone else has to beat you, then you kind of just have to play your own game. But come TI5, our game was kind of figured out, I think, the way we played the game, and it was hard for us to adapt at such a short notice, I think, which is probably a sign of what makes what separates a really good team from a good team, the ability to change up the way you play. Because, for example, we saw that us being unable to change the way we play, it was probably like deep rooted in how we play the game, and then as a result, us being unable to adapt kind of just made us lose and eventually disband. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to fish for any sensationalist stuff, but what I do want to ask you to kind of stay on a positive note, if we go back to the time where conflict just happened and you guys disbanded, what would be like a character trait, maybe for you personally, or perhaps something where you would have wished that you might have been able to do differently during that stressful time?
If anything, I think I should have comforted S4 more. I think he took a lot of responsibility for the loss because he was captain, and he had like some lackluster games in the playoffs and whatnot. And then also, I mean, the whole Kuroki Artur situation was kind of messed up because there was a lot of tension between the two, and I guess being unable to kind of smoothen that relation out was a bit difficult, because of course no one wants to see people argue and fight and whatnot. But it was also one of those things where it didn't start at TI in a sense, if you understand. Like it was before even like the tension between them, and it kind of just spiraled out of control at TI when we lost. And then afterwards things weren't handled that well in terms of disbanding. I think an eventual disband was inevitable because I was going back to school regardless. But then, I mean, maybe the team could have stuck together if things were ended on a better note with a replacement for me. But yeah.
Just maybe, without going into detail, could you talk a bit about, like, was the source of tension in terms of different understandings of the game or the communication?
The game understanding was kind of the same. I think it was the ability to understand each other and respect each other's wishes. That was kind of lacking. I think they both had a very strong sense of how to play the game, which was kind of similar in terms of how to play the game, but at some points they kind of went different ways, and then when that occurred in the game, it would lead to arguments and stuff, and then the relation between the carry and the support is always very vulnerable, I think, because if the carry has a bad game, he's going to blame the support. If the carry has a bad game, or if the support has a bad game, the carry has to take like the responsibility himself, and it leads to a lot of like natural tension between the two. They're kind of really dependent on each other, so yeah.
How is just to wrap this up, very good point about the relationship between support and carry player. How would you think of, can you talk a bit about the mood in EG? Because in between the games in that booth over there, I'm very surprised that after a loss it was, if I can just say this, for example, Arteezy just pointing out this and that, maybe we should focus on this and that, but there was no like negativity in the way they were talking. Talk a bit about the mood on EG right now.
I mean, that's what comes from having a professional environment, I think. It's very important to have your emotions neutral, to best ability. I mean, of course, you're going to get emotional sometimes, and it's kind of hard to avoid. But, of course, a team environment and a team will prosper from having a better environment, and a better environment comes from staying calm, being, objective, being not emotional, pretty much. So I think that's what EG is doing right now, and they're doing it well. Kind of just analyzing, what did we do well, what did we do bad, what should we do next time, and all that kind of stuff.
All right, last question. In your mind, are we going to see EG Secret in the grand finals?
I think so, yeah. I think they're far above the rest of the teams in the tournament.
All right, Zai, it was a pleasure having you on and an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys are looking forward to the grand final, whatever that may be. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.